this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Congratulations to you. You made it through another week. Yay, us. And for those of you who are working this weekend, we thank you. We thank you. I'm going to scoot my little bottom over to Costco at some point. I have renewed my Costco membership, and I am going to try to shop there as much as I possibly can, especially in place of Target, which has announced it's backing off from its DEI. Costco is doubling down. By the way, there is somebody on social media posted that she actually called Costco corporate headquarters to tell them that she really supported their DEI stance, that diversity was good for their business and they weren't going to back away from it, and they didn't want people voting yes on a shareholder proposal to do away with it. The operator at Costco, she reports on her social media, thanked her for the call, told her that they had been receiving lots of negative calls. Okay, I will copy this. When I figure out which platform I'm on here, I'm going to put this on my Blue Sky, the phone number. It's Joan Esposito at bsky.social. And I am going to repost the phone number for Costco. It doesn't take more than a couple of minutes you have to dial this number, press 0 for the operator. She says, don't be put off by silence. Somebody will pick up. And then you can thank them for what they're doing, not to back away from DEI. And the operator that spoke to this woman took her name and said she was going to pass it along to the CEO. So if you have a pencil handy, I'm old-fashioned. Okay, if you have a pen handy, or if you're holding your phone, hit voice memo and just record this right now. 425-313-8100, press 0. 425-313-8100, press 0. And thank Costco. And if you don't have a Costco membership, promise you there's probably one near you, get one. Because they sell a lot of the same things that you pick up at Target. They even have groceries. And as I said the other day, it's not that I'm not gonna cut up my Target card, because Target still sells things that are produced by black-owned businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses, and they will tell you when you're looking at different products, they will tell you when it is a woman-owned business. So continue to support that. But, I'm one of those people that whenever I would go into Target for one thing, I would come out with a $200 bill because of all the other things I realized I couldn't live without or desperately needed. No more. No more. You have to resist with your dollars as well as with your actions. And speaking of resistance, this is beautiful. I am going to, by the way, it's Friday. For the first half of the show, we take calls 773-763-9278. We're going to take your calls and read your texts. But I want to share with you a beautiful example of resistance. 60 employees of USAID were supposed to be placed on leave, and the accusation they had been undermining Trump's executive orders. They went to the boss and they said, put all these people, these 60 people, put them on leave. They're undermining Donald Trump. That boss in question was a guy by the name of Nick Gottlieb. He didn't want to fire the 60 workers he had been ordered to fire because they were supposedly thwarting Trump. So he did a little investigation on his own, and he didn't find anything that was a firing offense. So he decided not to put those people on leave. And what happened? He was put on leave. He was placed on administrative leave. Okay? So he wrote this. Today, representatives of the agency's front office and DOJ instructed me to violate the due process of our employees by issuing immediate termination notices to a group of employees without due process. I refused and have provided Acting Administrator Gray with written notification of my refusal. I have recommended in that written notification that his office cease and desist from further illegal activity. It is and has always been my office's commitment to the workforce that we ensure all employees receive their due process in any of our actions. I will not be party to a violation of that commitment. I was notified moments ago that I will be placed on administrative leave effective immediately. It has been an honor working with all of you at this agency, which I treasure. Please be kind and considerate of my staff, who will be very short-staffed and pressed over the coming months. Until you hear otherwise, this names a woman who will be acting in his absence. If you'd like to stay in touch, I can be reached at, and then he gives his private email and says, I wish you all the best. And a little bit later, this was sent out. All attached, please find a memorandum documenting the cancellation of your administrative leave status under my authority. But before you get your hopes up, your system's accesses remain severed. You may receive another email within the day reinstating your leave status. However, that notice won't come from me. I've reviewed the materials that served as the purported basis for your placement on this status. Most of you had no role whatsoever in those materials, and for the small number of you actually involved, the materials show no evidence that you engaged in misconduct. As a result, I no longer have authority to maintain you in this status. Someone else may claim to have that authority, and I wish them the best in making an argument to that end. I may not maintain my own accesses for much longer, so if you'd like to stay in touch, da-da-da. And then he followed up with the fact that he had indeed been placed on administrative leave because he protested illegal activity in the USAID front office, the memo titled Farewell and Thanks Again. That, my friends, is resistance. This was a move that, because USAID, it's not a huge organization, doesn't get a huge amount of attention. Trump folks probably thought this maneuver would just fly under the radar, and instead, it is, as they say, going viral. Nicholas Gottlieb, you are my hero. Refusing to fire people without due process, as is required by the law, and then himself being kicked to the curb. This, of course, will end up in court. The bosses that directed this will be found to have violated due process, which hopefully means whether or not Nicholas and the 60 workers under him are reinstated, they will at the very least, I'm hoping, walk away with some kind of a severance, some kind of a settlement. hey, I'm not going to fire you because you're not being allowed due process. Whoops, they just fired me. Resistance, that's what it looks like, kids. Standing up for what you know it's right. And not just standing up for it, but documenting it. I mean, what he wrote is now viral. We now understand what's going on. A lot of what the Trump administration is trying to do is illegal. They are, whenever they fire a civil servant, if you want to fire a civil servant, there is a process that you go through that is legally mandated. They don't care. They're firing everybody left and right. One other really positive, wonderful thing that I want to share with you. You know, Bishop Marian Edgar Buddy was the one who spoke at the religious service, and where Trump and Melania were in the front row, and she begged him to show mercy. She told him people were scared, and she begged him to show mercy to the people who were scared right now, whether they were immigrants or whether they were gay. They were scared, and they needed his empathy, his better angel. Yeah. Might have been what Jesus would have said, might have been the Christian thing to do, but it didn't go over well with Trump. He's now going after her. And he said she was a nasty woman for saying that. So when I saw on social media that the Committee on Faith and Order of the United Methodist Church had posted a letter, I was like, oh my God, please don't tell me these are another bunch of so-called Christians who are going to trash her because she dared ask the president to show mercy. I was so pleasantly surprised when I read this letter that I want to read it to you. Again, this is from Bishop David Bard for the United Methodist Committee on Faith and Order. Dear Bishop Buddy, grace and peace to you from our God and our Lord Jesus Christ. The Committee on Faith and Order of the United Methodist Church is a resource for our denomination that provides, quote, a venue and context for ongoing conversation on matters of faith, doctrine, order, and discipline. We gathered this weekend to engage in our work, and in some of our discussion reflected on the theological conversation happening in the United States at this time, including your sermon at the National Cathedral on January 21st. Your sermon sought to ground national unity in honoring the inherent dignity of all, in honest conversation and in humility. Because you ended your sermon asking the newly elected U.S. president to have mercy on frightened and vulnerable persons, you have been the recipient of vitriol and threats to your well-being. A resolution has even been introduced in the House of Representatives condemning your sermon. At the same time, many voices have risen to support you, and we join those voices. In the United Methodist Church, we encourage our bishops to live out, quote, a prophetic commitment for the transformation of the church and the world, unquote. We say the role of the bishop is to be a prophetic voice for justice in a suffering and conflicted world. We believe this is in keeping with the prophetic tradition of Amos, who encouraged us to let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And Micah, who told us that what the Lord requires is justice, kindness, and humility before God. We believe this is in keeping with the ministry of Jesus, who took special care for the least. We witnessed such Episcopal leadership in you this week. You inspired and encouraged us. As a committee, we found your sermon profoundly rooted in the prophetic tradition of our shared Christian faith, while being delivered with gentleness and respect. We are pleased to call you a friend in Christ and offer our prayers. Grace and peace, David A. Bard, for the United Methodist Committee on Faith and Order. That is also what is required of us right now. Resist what is wrong and recognize and support what is right in this world. I am so glad to have those two wonderfully positive things. Yes, the guy at USAID lost his job, and frankly, those 60s employees are probably out the door as well. But he has acknowledged publicly that it is illegal, the way it is being done, and that there is no cause to justify the charges. And maybe, months or a year from now, when the courts finally decide this, they will be either reinstated or reimbursed. We've got to cling to this. We've got to use what power we have. Not everybody can do everything, but everybody can do something. If you, I don't know if you're on social media or what you use, but there are a number of people posting on social media, companies that are resisting the pressure to back away from DEI. The press secretary, the angry blonde woman, she said something from the podium that ties in to this where we hate DEI. By the way, DEI, let's be clear about this. Let's be crystal clear about this. DEI, in many instances, is the new version of the N-word. So let's be clear about that. Republicans over time have used a lot of code phrases when what they're really saying is let's get rid of the black people. Of course, they also really want to get rid of the brown people and the women, too. So it is even bigger than that. But DEI, in many instances, is used because they can't use the N-word and get away with it. Whoopi Goldberg recently addressed the angry blonde lady who spoke in front of the White House press corps, who we're going to be hearing a lot from. Because apparently that angry blonde lady, I missed this part of the press conference, but she said something about there is not going to be any woke in this room. There will be no woke in this administration. Woke is gone. And on The View, Whoopi Goldberg addressed that. Some of you who are younger can't remember back when women couldn't get a lot of jobs. There were colleges women couldn't get into. It wasn't all that long ago that a woman wasn't allowed to get her own credit card. Whether or not she had her own job, she couldn't get a credit card unless her husband signed. This was not ancient history. This is like 50 years ago. Whoopi Goldberg wanted the angry blonde woman to remember that the main reason she had that job was because people like Whoopi and people like me fought for equity, fought to get an even shot. This whole DEI thing, I obviously am connected to a lot of my current and former TV people, production people. And one of them, who's a real doll and a firecracker, posted just how angry she was. As a young black woman, she got her shot in television because of DEI, because all of a sudden people woke up and said, oh, my God, behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, we're just a bunch of white men. Maybe we should reflect our audience. And she said, yeah. She said, I was a DEI hire. And it was the only way a black woman was going to get into television news. Another friend of mine who is a very successful, award-winning independent producer now said when she got her first job in television as a part-time producer, she was told the only reason that they gave her the job, which paid, I think, a little over $4 an hour, was because their bosses told them they had to hire some women, but they wanted her to understand that they didn't want her there. They made it very clear. The only reason we hired you is because we were forced to. We don't want you here. And, oh, by the way, we will never make you a full-time worker. Never. She ended up being an award-winning producer and very successful throughout her career. But that was how it started. We don't want you here, and we are never going to give you a chance. Forget about getting a promotion. We're never even going to bring you on full-time. I could go on, my friends. And for those of you who are young enough to listen to this and just be amazed that it was ever like that, trust me, it was like that. Whoopi Goldberg, I think, said it well for all of us. Listen to this.
It really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah.
Because women were not invited to that table. Mm-hmm. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation. The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this. And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason. Because black people couldn't get into colleges. Because women could not get into the colleges they wanted to go to. This is all women. Yeah. See, this is not black, Asian women. This is all women. Women were not invited to this party. It was a man's world, and we busted our asses to make sure that this was a person's world. So please stop using that phrase and talking about, because you don't understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. You're saying about yourself that, you know, hey, that's a terrible thing to be. It's not a terrible thing to be. That's why we fought. That's what we were fighting for, so that you could stand in that podium, so that Catherine Jean-Pierre could stand at that podium. So women of all kinds of colors and ilks, wherever they came from, whatever their belief system was, they had the opportunity to bust down that door.
The very fact that she is there in a job she never would have gotten in the bad old days, and she can turn around and spit on all of us who busted our butts for the angry blonde woman to have that opportunity. I'm a little ticked. I started off so nice, and now I'm a little ticked. Let's take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Thank you, my dear texters, for calling Costco. The number, somebody asked Paul Chavari for me to read the number again. By the way, I don't know if you're on Blue Sky, but I have posted the phone number on Blue Sky, and it is 425 313-8100, 425-313-8100. Press 0 for the operator. They don't have apparently any good music to listen to, and wait for someone to pick up. By the way, somebody else texted me. I saw this. I saw this post. Another company that is resisting efforts to disband any sort of DEI. God forbid there should be diversity. Because, the implication is if you're against DEI, it's not that you... Better way to say it, Joan. You're worried that a black person's going to take a job that you might otherwise get or an opportunity. Maybe, there's a lot more women than men who apply to college these days. So, for a lot of colleges, the standard to get in if you're a woman is much higher. Even 10 years ago, my daughter applied to a fancy college. And a friend of a friend's daughter applied to the same fancy college, and neither of them got in. But the friend of a friend's daughter had a guy she went to school with, who didn't have the social activities, didn't have the extracurriculars, didn't have the grades, and didn't have the test scores she had. I think you know where this is going. That boy got in. Because colleges are having to do that. They're raising the standards in some cases for girls, lowering them for boys so that they can be at a fair 50-50 value. And if you don't think Jared Kushner getting into Harvard was DEI, you don't really understand. Was he diverse? Was it equitable? Was it inclusion? Actually, it should be DEIR. No, he got in because his family was wealthy. If you make a big donation to Harvard, if you, let's say, build them a new building, I don't care how mediocre your kids' test scores and grades are, sweetheart, they're going to Harvard. And if you don't think that's affirmative action, if you don't think that's unfair, it's unfair. We can look and say, well, that boy shouldn't have got in. He didn't have the resume. The girls did. But they were going for some kind of equity. So do we like it? No. Do we understand it? Yes. In my career, there was at least one occasion where I know I didn't get a job because it was a situation where there were going to be two people working together, and because of the community, the diverse community that they were going to be addressing on television, it was felt that one of those people should be white and one of those people should be black. And by the time I applied for the job, they had already hired one white person. And I was told, you were great, you were absolutely, totally capable of doing this job, but we are looking for an African-American person, not another white person, because of the community we are going to be broadcasting to. I got it. I absolutely got it. It made sense to me. Luckily, I just went in another direction. Put other irons in the fire. Would I have enjoyed the job? Sure. But did I understand? Absolutely, I understood. And to hear some of my former coworkers, some of whom are my age, some of whom are a little older than me, and how nobody, no matter how, you assume, if you're saying if somebody's a DEI hire, that means they're unqualified. Oh, well, yeah, we had all these really qualified white men, but couldn't hire them, had to go for an unqualified woman. No. A lot of times what it means is you're just as qualified, you're just as good, maybe even better, but they don't want to hire you because they like the way things are. White men loved it when white men were everywhere, getting all the jobs and calling all the shots. I don't fault them for that. Of course, who doesn't want to be on top? Okay. Did you get that phone number? Let's go to the phone lines before I burst a blood vessel. Jim is on the line from Chicago. You know, Jim, you're usually the one who loses control and starts yelling. I seem to have taken over that responsibility today.
Yeah, that spirit's moving into February. You know what I mean? But anyway, look out with that. That can be contagious. But as this Republican Party speeds up to fill this liquor cabinet with the most bizarre booze that they can find in the United States, I think of Our Majesty outlawing reason, which I find with subjects. He's outlawing reason with subjects. But what I really miss, Joan, is charm. His subjects are so null and void of charm that I'm at wit's end with it. I can take a lot of abuse, but I'd like to at least somebody in the rhetoric, at least be a little charming about it. And they have simply are completely void of it. Whenever they went to charm school, they must have played hooky because they didn't. They missed the lessons out.
Well, Donald Trump not only has I've heard that people who have been around him say that he has a certain charisma, but he has no empathy, and he has he's a blunt instrument. And I mean, look at the way he reacted to this crash. Oh, let's have a moment of silence. Oh, by the way, though, it's only common sense that this was Obama and Biden and all their DEI. That's why this happened. I don't have any proof of that, but it's common sense.
But Joan, that sounds like paranoia to me. That sounds like a dictator with paranoia. In other words, you can't take anything on the surface. You've got to dig in and promote yourself under any circumstance. It could be any tragedy. I mean, to put yourself in the middle of a tragedy, I've never heard anything like it in my life. If you've heard it from a president of the United States or anybody, if anybody suggests that to me, I think you're completely nuts. What are you talking? This is a tragedy that we haven't even got to the bottom of yet.
I know.
But anyway, Joan, it's going to be February. January is over, thank God. It's the 31st, and I don't know, as we plow through each day. But what's interesting is this idea that I'm looking at everywhere you go, you can't find it. Nothing rings true, which is very difficult to live under those circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
If everything you read and everything you hear, nothing rings true, you start to wonder, where did the country go wrong? We know where it went wrong.
That's actually a technique for fascists and dictators, because if you don't know what's true, then you are more likely to believe their lies. Because if you know what's true and somebody lies to you, you go, well, that's a lie. But if you don't know what's true, you are more inclined to believe whatever they say.
I guess so, but it's hard to believe in the United States of America. That's what's really difficult. To try to explain this to a European or somebody else that you're saying you're in Australia or wherever you're at, you try to explain this, how he slipped into this malaise of insanity. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you would approach it, Joan. But anyway, you have a great weekend and a restful weekend, and I don't know. It's just so hard to avoid this insanity. You know what I mean? It's just so hard to avoid. We talked about that last week. How do you avoid it? You can amuse yourself in different ways, but still, it keeps creeping back into your psyche. That, oh my goodness, this is beyond the pale. This is unbelievable. Anyway, Joan, have a great weekend. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Bye, Joan.
We're going to take a break and come back with more of your calls right after this.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is Friday. See, look at how calm I am. It is Friday, and we are taking your calls. We are reading your texts and having this conversation for the first half of the show today. Let's go to Hyde Park now. Andrew is on the line. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm pretty good, I guess.
Yeah, no, I understand. As a father and a person of color.
Yep. Paul, he faded away. Do we? Oh,
I'm here.
Yeah, okay, yeah. You faded away for a minute, so start over.
3 girls, a man of color, about nature. You know, I remember when my wife was unable to get a credit card. Can you hear me?
Yes, Yeah.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that we've got to step up to the plate. I respect Andrew, John, and all the others that regularly called in, but instead of complaining, we've got to call some of the radio stations like I did yesterday, Fox News and others I called in, and whether or not they respond back to me, that's another story. But at least I put it out there that they've got to start looking at the thing too, because if I go down, they go down. If this becomes a communist state, you know, I'm an Air Force man, I'm a firefighter, you know, retired and all that stuff. But what I'm saying is that, you know, and I'm not going to talk about Trump saying about the firefighters and what they did and what they didn't do, and the aircraft people and the thing. I remember Jim Tillman, you know.
Yeah.
Jim Tillman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I remember Jim Tillman saying, and I was talking to somebody this when we were talking about what happened at Reagan National Airport. Jim Tillman, who was a pilot for American Airlines, he said the most dangerous parts of a flight are the 2 minutes after takeoff and the 2 minutes before landing. And he said that there were some airports where both he and his co-captain, man, when they were landing, their heads were on a swivel, looking for a small aircraft, looking for anybody that might be out of their flight lane.
Yeah, I've had to, I was in SAC Command at Omaha, Nebraska, and I've had to, rescue several things, unfortunately, people coming in, where those planes crashed and everything, and go in there. And but all I'm saying is we need to call the Republicans and let them know if it becomes communist for the Democrats, it becomes communist for the Republicans. And I don't know what they think by trying to put all these people in these offices and these situations of these, as heads of all these things that Donald Trump is trying to put them in. We've got to call the Republicans and remind some of these people that they've got to step up to the plate too. It's their job. And I need Jim and Bob and all the others that called in to do the same thing. You know, we can all call in and complain about how bad things are. We all know how bad things are. But we do need to start calling Republicans, whether we know them, whether we know the stations or whatever, and at least put our voices out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, we call Costco, we tell them thanks. We pay attention to what our state reps, our state senators, our congresspeople, our senators are doing, our governors, our mayors, our village presidents. We've really got to get up off the couch, at least go across the room to the phone
Thank you.
And let your dialing finger, let your dialing finger take over your activism. It's a very legitimate thing to do.
I was at Jesse Brown's yesterday. I mean, it was just betting. The people just didn't know which way they were going, what they were doing. They were canceling appointments. Then they started rescheduling people. But things are out of hand. So we got to reach out and not let this man take this country down to where it's going. It's going to hurt everybody.
Yep.
It's going to hurt my white brothers, my black brothers.
Yes, it is. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for the call. Let's go to Ron from Chicago. Hello, Ron.
Yes, how you doing? Yes, the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, I don't call her the angry blonde woman. I call her the snippy B word.
Ooh.
Nasty. So tomorrow starts the tariffs. So how high will
25% on Mexico, 25% on Canada. How long do you think, Ron? Should we set our timers on our watches? How long do you think it's going to take for those countries to retaliate? And then everybody loses. Everybody loses.
Not very long. And about 70% of the merchandise from Walmart that's sold comes from China. So that's just one part of it too.
Oh yeah.
Everything. Yeah. And the Pope Francis has said that we should treat the undocumented migrants with some humility and respect. And
I was just reading in the Washington Post this morning that apparently purported Catholic J.D. Vance is not too happy with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops because they're saying, we really ought to look out for our immigrants. We got to treat them right. And that is just not sitting well with J.D. Vance.
No. And the right-wing media is now calling Pope Francis that Argentinian socialist.
Yeah.
they don't care who they.
Well, Donald Trump has only been in office since the 20th, and look at how many people he has angered and alienated. I mean, if he keeps up at this rate, when the midterm elections come, there isn't going to be a single Republican anywhere that hangs on to their seat. And you know what? Maybe that's how it should be. I mean, we would love to stop the worst of what he's doing, and we're making those efforts, but, he's a bull in a china shop right now. He doesn't care if he writes an executive order that is illegal. He doesn't care about that. He's, let it work its way through the courts. At least in the interim, I might get what I want. Or even if I end up not getting what I want, I can go to my MAGA base and say, look, I promised you this. I tried. That the deep state thwarted me. Look, I never reneged on any of my promises to you. Oh, sure, they said it was illegal, but we know they just hate Donald Trump, and really they hate you. I mean, come on. It's the same old song and dance we get from him.
Right. And one more thing about the plane crash. Some of the people who perished, and they were with the championship figure skating. So they just had to stick a microphone in front of America's sweetheart, Nancy Kerrigan.
Yeah, I saw her sobbing as she talked about it yesterday.
Yeah, where's Tony Harding when you need her?
Mm. It was really sad, and there was a woman who was getting ready to join the faculty of, I think it was Howard University's law school. Sherilyn Eiffel was posting her picture. I mean, the whole thing is just so incredibly, incredibly sad. Just incredibly sad. And I it was interesting because, as I'm sure you saw, after this crash, there was, I don't know, I think it was another commuter jet pilot, and they said, just a few days earlier, they had to veer off their landing because a helicopter was in their way. I understand the helicopter was on a training mission. It would seem that there would have been someplace else it could have been training, but we'll find out. Anyway, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, they said the helicopter was flying at 400 feet when it should have been flying at 200 feet. So that's one mistake that was made.
Yeah. Usually when there's something like this of a nature that happens, it's rarely just one mistake. It's like this mistake compounded this mistake, and that's how we got here.
Right. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Ron.
you. Bye.
Let's go out to Woodstock, Illinois. Bill is on the line. Hey, Bill, thanks for the call today.
Hi, Joan. It's Bill Wilson calling. Two things. Bishop Buddy, I sent her a letter and thanked her for what she did at the inauguration. And the second thing is, you were talking yesterday about Governor Pritzker calling the governors, Democratic governors, and saying we need to get on the ball here and get things rolling and quit being so, lackadaisical about it. The day before that, I had called Senator Durbin and told him the same thing. I talked to his aide, but I said, someone's got to get angry out there and start letting this stuff out. We can't just let this keep on going. And so anyway, I sent a letter to the Chief Justice and explained my displeasure with him in the court. So anyway, I'm doing my small part.
Good for you.
That's it.
Good for you.
That's all I had.
Well, that's plenty. That's plenty. Pace yourself, Bill. I don't want you to get exhausted. But keep up the good. Absolutely, keep up the good work. And you were talking about Pritzker. I saw Washington Governor Jay Inslee was on. I think it was Morning Joe this morning. I don't watch Morning Joe, but I saw a clip of it. He was on that call, and he said, we have been disappointed that Democrats, particularly in the Senate, have really not been coming out and leading the charge. And Jay Inslee said, I think this most recent move of Trump's of trying to basically freeze any kind of federal aid or spending, he said, I think that might have just been the motivation they needed, because now I'm starting to see, the Democrats in the Senate speak up. But, that's been one of our complaints here on this radio station. It's like, where's the leadership? Where's the leadership? Who's out there fighting? Because it sure doesn't seem like it's the Democrats we've come to know and love. But, Bill, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for the call.
Thank you, Joan. Bye-bye.
Bye. And let's hope that this call, that the governors, the Democratic governors, had a call with Chuck Schumer, and it was organized in part by J.B. Pritzker. And they were like, dude, get off your butt. Get the other Democratic senators off their collective butts and have them start talking, have them start going on the shows, have them start fighting, have them start trying to thwart every piece of legislation, even if it's just a procedural delay. Do something. Fight back. And Schumer apparently told them, Cory Booker was trying to teach the rest of the Senate, how to use social media. Like what Facebook, post on Facebook a couple times a day, Instagram, TikTok. We'll see. We'll see what happens. And, talking about the whole what women were and weren't allowed to do. This was in the early 90s. And I was in Oaxaca, Mexico, the state of Oaxaca, at the Sears store in Oaxaca. This was in the 90s. This was maybe 30, 35 years ago. And I was buying something. And, I gave them my Sears card. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And everybody's kind of standing around, looking around. And finally, after several minutes, I said, well, what's the problem? And they said, we're waiting for your husband to come back and tell us it's okay to charge this. The credit card was in my name. Sears store in Oaxaca, Mexico in the 90s. And they were waiting for my husband to come back to tell them that it was okay to run the card. I ain't going back. I want to share with you real quick. This does not take very long. There's an official by the name of Thomas Waits in the Austrian government, and he had posted some anti-Trump things that got a lot of attention. And so this Austrian Thomas W-A-I-T-Z Waits wanted to let us know that we shouldn't give up. Listen to this.
Hi, I am the Austrian politician that called out Musk salute for what it actually is. And I got so many comments from you people that are telling me that they're scared and that this makes them angry. And yes, it's absolutely understandable. It also makes me angry to see how the president of the most powerful country of the world is handing over this country to his tech billionaire friends that have basically only one aim: to get even richer as they are already. And yes, it is absolutely scary to see how more and more symbols, words, and terms are used that remind me of our darkest Nazi history. And while it's absolutely legitimate and understandable that people are scared and angry, please don't let these feelings wash over you. Because we're so many on the globe that stand for democracy, for human rights, that are ready to stand up against hatred and polarization. And I ask you, find your friends, find your family members, and stand up for modern democracy, human rights, and against polarization and hatred. No matter where you come from, what you believe, or which political preferences you have. We're many. Let's stand up together for our modern democracy.
Thank you, Thomas. We are going to take a break for news and be back with more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Thank you, Mr. Shivari. Sometimes during the news, I shut my mic off, and because I'm a broadcasting professional, sometimes I forget to turn it back on. It was a test for you, Paul, and I want you to know you passed. Are you happy?
Very happy.
Okay, it is Friday, and as you know, for the first half of the show every Friday, we take texts and calls. We talk about the news of the day. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. I've said this before, but if you've never called in before, a good way to remember it is 773-763-WCPT. Most of the texts that I'm getting are people telling me that things that they have done to reach out to either corporations or the Supreme Court or lawmakers to weigh in on what they're doing and what they should be doing. Yay, that is wonderful. Like I said, you know, I let my Costco card go. It just didn't feel like it was a place that I was going that much anymore. But as soon as I read that they were pushing back on a shareholder proposal to back away from any DEI initiatives, I went online and signed up again. And I'm going to drive over there this weekend and get another beautiful photograph. You ever seen those photographs on the Costco card? They make driver's license photos look beautiful. But I'm back, and I will be shopping at Costco on a regular basis because I'm going to use my dollars, my disposable income, to support the companies that are resisting. J.P. Morgan just promoted an African-American man to lead one of their really important divisions. Elf Cosmetics, you know, you find Elf counters all over. They're frankly about half the price of regular drugstore brands. They are committing to DEI. Find out and speak with your dollars, as well as using your phone to contact people and weigh in. And I appreciate all of you. And especially, I've gotten so many texts from people who've either thanked Costco or worked at Costco, and people came up and thanked the workers. We do what we can. We can't do everything, but we can do something, right? Those are going to be our words going forward. Paul told me that a caller who didn't want to go on the air said that I should say we should bring back the peace sign buttons. Yeah. I mean, you know, 60s and 70s, that was a way to let the government know that you were in opposition to the Vietnam War. When I was in high school, the guys I went to high school with were part of the lottery. You know, they used to have a draft, but so many wealthy people were evading the draft, and there were all these exceptions, like, oh, you're in college? Okay, we'll give you an exception. So essentially they were drafting poor people. And people wore peace signs. It was a silent protest against the Vietnam War. And, it's not a bad idea. Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Let's go to the phone lines. Rudy is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Rudy, how are you? Thanks for the call.
Hi, Joan, a long-time listener and the first time I call.
Oh, thanks for calling.
I heard your comment about Mexico refusing your credit card. First of all, sorry that happened to you. As you know, back in the 40s or 50s, we had the same situation here in the United States.
Oh, God, yeah. Women couldn't get credit cards up until I think it was the early 70s when the law was passed that a woman could get a credit card in her own name, for God's sake.
Okay, but when you made that comment, an evil thought came to my mind because my wife is in Mexico right now visiting her mother and gives me charges so much for a credit card. Never mind. It was just a joke, but yeah. It doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't call them and tell them not to run it.
Yes, so, again, I was just going to make that comment. Thank you for everything you do, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rudy. That's very kind of you. You know, I wanted to, one other thing that, well, more than one other thing, but this thing particular that I wanted to share with you. I've been complaining, and obviously Pritzker's been complaining, and Washington Governor Jay Inslee's been complaining that prominent Democrats don't seem to know how to resist Donald Trump. They don't seem to know how to thwart him. They're not organized. They don't seem to have a plan. One exception to this rule, God love him, has been Chris Murphy. Chris Murphy is the Democratic senator from Connecticut. And every day, Chris Murphy is out there fighting, pointing out what's wrong, pointing out what's ridiculous, calling it out for what it is. Even, I think I played this for you a week or two ago, calling out his own party. He was like, where are the Democrats? You know, like, where is everybody? Why isn't everybody protesting this every day? And I told you, Chuck Schumer told the governors, well, you know, Cory Booker's trying to teach them how to use social media, telling them, you know, this is Facebook, post once or twice a day. TikTok, you should be posting like 4 times a day. Instagram. You know, when Barack Obama was elected, Republican leadership went to a restaurant in D.C. in a private room in the back. Kevin McCarthy was there, among others. But it was the leadership. And they talked all night, all evening, about how they were going to thwart Barack Obama, how they were going to try desperately to make him a one-term president, how they were going to prevent any of his legislation from getting passed. Now, obviously, not all those plans were successful, but they met. They were, an opponent of theirs had been elected to the White House, and they wanted to plan how they could best organize themselves, their Republican elected folks, and Republicans in general, how they could best thwart Obama. Do you think Chuck Schumer called a meeting like that? Do you think there was a plan? This is what we have to do. These are the steps we have to take. These are the messages. These are the procedural delays. These are the times when we stand together and vote against as one. I don't know what is wrong with these people. everybody at the grassroots level is ready to pick up their pitchfork and assault the castle. And Cory Booker's teaching them how to use TikTok. And, you know, this guy Connolly, remember how AOC was looking to be ran for the leadership position, and because Nancy Pelosi threw her weight behind Connolly, the 74-year-old white man with cancer? Yeah. Where's he been? I'm sorry. Has he been on the Sunday shows? Has he been posting on social media? Has he been speaking out? If he has, you know, please text me. Tell me where I can find it. And at the time when I was expressing concern, everybody's like, oh, you don't understand. He's a fighter. Oh, he's a fighter. He's going to be great. Okay, where is he? Where is he? AOC is out there every day, posting on social media, talking to people. Where's Connolly? Did I miss it? Chris Murphy is my new hero. I sort of really didn't think much about him before, but he is doing what I wish every single elected Democrat would do. He is speaking loud and long and passionately about this administration. Chris Murphy gave a press conference recently, and he talked about a lot of different things. But one of the things that really struck me was he talked about how Donald Trump handled this plane crash in D.C., and it really was cruel and heartless. He handled it the way he handles everything. He's a victim. He's angry. You should be angry. It's somebody's fault. But it's whoever I'm hating right now, that's whose fault, whatever this thing that happened is. God love Chris Murphy. He stood up and he fought fire with fire, and I am waiting to start seeing this on a daily basis. But let's start with our first and best hero so far, Democratic Senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy. Listen to this.
I just watched some of Donald Trump's press conference about the tragedy last night, and it was disgusting. It was disgusting. First of all, our hearts go out to the victims' families, to the first responders. This is awful. But what is also awful is to watch the President of the United States stand up at the White House and claim that it is women or black people or Latinos working at the FAA that caused this crash. This idea that by hiring non-white men, you are putting the nation's safety in jeopardy, or that non-white men caused this crash, is unconscionable. We need to get to the bottom of what happened. Nobody's going to know today what caused that crash. But what we absolutely know is that it is not women working at the FAA that caused that crash. What we definitely know is it is not black employees at the FAA that caused that crash. There are some true things. President Trump forced out of office the administrator of the FAA. He's been waging a regular assault on public employees since he came into office. He forced the entire Aviation Security Review Board, Advisory Board, to step down. We don't know whether those things had anything to do with this crash, but we should take the time to get to the facts. And everybody in this country should be outraged that Donald Trump is standing up on that podium lying to you, deliberately lying to you about what the cause was, and further using the White House as a means to try to divide us from each other. That performance was disgraceful, and every single senator and member of Congress should call him out for how disgraceful it was.
Yes, they should. Will they? We'll see. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Friday, we take your calls and texts, and usually on the breaks, I try to catch up with the text line. And may I just say that the text line is on fire today? And I'm, people sort of let their freak flag fly free on the text line, and I can appreciate that, but it also means that I can't always read them on the air. Here's one I can read. I was talking about DEI and how sometimes a job has to go to somebody that doesn't look like you or sound like you in the interest of fairness. They texted in, white men usually don't have to fight for their rights. That's probably why the Dems don't know how to fight back right now. I don't know what the problem is, honest to God. Hate is a strong word, but I intensely dislike and very nearly hate Mitch McConnell. But Mitch McConnell was a strategic thinker. Mitch McConnell made me crazy because he would not only use the regular wheels of government, but he would use procedural techniques to slow things down, to thwart things. Remember when Obama still had a year left on his presidency and Mitch McConnell wouldn't let him fill a Supreme Court seat because it was too close to the election? And Mitch McConnell could do that because there were more Republicans in the Senate than there were Democrats, and there was no way to get around it. And then all of a sudden, when it was a Republican in office, remember Amy Coney Barrett? What was it, 8 weeks that they shoved her through from start to finish? Mitch McConnell was in many respects, well, he's still alive, so I guess he still is in many respects, I think a sincerely evil man. But he knows what he wants, and what he wants is for Republicans to stay in power and for the Republican Party to be powerful. And he will move heaven and earth to make that happen. He did move heaven and earth and really skirted the edge of the law to make that happen. I'm sorry. I think Chuck Schumer is a very smart man. I think his heart's in the right place, but I don't think anybody would describe Chuck Schumer as a fighter, somebody willing to go to the mat the way Mitch McConnell did for the Republicans. I always get the feeling when Chuck Schumer speaks with his little half glasses that I'm back in college and I'm in a lecture hall. And Democrats wonder why they've lost touch with working people. It's not even the fact that he's an old, rich, white man. Look at Bernie Sanders. Old, rich, white man who has never forgotten what's important and has never forgotten how to talk to people. One other thing, as we wrap up, that I've been meaning to touch on this whole week. I told you about a doctor, Franklin Rubin. I think Franklin's his first name, who's on Instagram, and you can find him at Rubin, RUBIN _allergy. I don't know that he's on any other social media, but he's on Instagram. And he is trying to post regularly, bringing the same kind of medical information that the CDC used to put out daily, you know, things like recalls. Some of them are recalls for the public. Some of them are recalls for drug companies. Oh, you know, this batch of X drug was found to have metal fragments. Oh, you better pull that off the shelves. And here are the public health problems. Remember I told you that there's been a TB outbreak in Kansas. Not something that the rest of the world has to worry about, but something that should be kept an eye on. I mean, they had 30-some cases of tuberculosis. So this guy, Ruben_allergy on Instagram, is trying to bring public health information, recall information, the kind of information that you would have gotten from the CDC. He's trying to, as best he can, bring it to the attention of people. He has not, at least as far as I know, done a deep dive into this. You know, I used to be a medical reporter when I was at Channel 5 and Channel 7. And before that, my bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree in allied medicine with a major in respiratory therapy. I worked for several years at the Ohio State University Hospital. So I like to follow medical people. I like to read medical articles. It is something that's always interested me. Kids, this is not a good time to muffle the CDC, and it is not a good time to put Bobby Kennedy Jr. in charge of Health and Human Services, because there are a lot of virologists, the people who study viruses, who I follow, who are sounding an alarm about bird flu. You want to know why the price of eggs right now is going through the roof? It is because bird flu is, in many places, is decimating the bird populations. And here's the other fun fact. It's now spreading to dairy cows, to cows. There have been herds of cows that have been found to have bird flu. Why is that important? Because some of the worst diseases we have start in animals and jump to another species. Because when that happens, like if you're a bird and there's an illness that birds have been having for 100 years, most birds will have built up some resistance to it. But if that same illness jumps to a different species, there's no protection. Bird flu is now infecting cattle. And there are a lot of virologists who are terrified that it is going to... Bird flu has already been found in people. We've had one death in this country. The fear is that a human being will contract bird flu and it will mutate inside that person. You know how we have to keep getting COVID shots because the virus keeps mutating? The fear is a human being with bird flu will mutate it so that it is more transmissible to other people. COVID has been found to have a 1% death rate. Bird flu has a close to 50% death rate. The virologists are worried that if this one makes the jump, it is going to hit us so hard and so fast that it's going to make COVID look like a vacation. And is our government ready? Is the CDC ready? Health and Human Services, are they ready? God help us. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
I am so pleased to welcome back our executive editor, the man behind Heartland Signal, Tim Hogan, is here. Tim, are you just having the best week ever?
Hey, Joan. Yeah, it's good. I don't know. I last week we were told this is a new disciplined Trump administration. They're coming in with a lot of ideas they're going to execute. And by week 2, we were asking ourselves if anybody knows if Medicaid still exists. So here we are.
Yes, indeed. And I'm sorry we have to live through this, but I've speculated all along that his lack of discipline, his tendency to overreach, and his profound lack of understanding of how government actually works, I think that, I've been complaining about how we haven't heard as much from Democrats on Capitol Hill as I would like. Luckily, Donald Trump seems to have guns pointed at his feet that he shoots on a regular basis. But I don't know how much longer we can count on that, because people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Jeff Bezos have, I think, learned that you write a big enough check and Trump will literally do whatever you want him to do. So I don't know how we fight that, Tim.
Well, I think right now there was a big question as to how exactly do we do that? How do the Democrats find their footing? We were caught off guard in the election. We always knew it was a possibility that Donald Trump was going to win, but we didn't really have a plan, and I think the energy was not there for the resistance that there was in 2017, because in 2017 we were able to say this is not normal, and there was a lot of mobilization. And the sad reality is this second election, this is normal. This is the current normal. So I think people were caught a little flat-footed by that. But to your point, look, the fuel that we need to fight back, we obviously need to do some soul searching and reflection and think about how we appeal to working class voters. But we also are seeing day in, day out the things that remind people why they do not like Donald Trump. He is handing the reins of the government over to Elon Musk. There is a ton of reporting. There's an exclusive from Reuters this afternoon about him installing his employees at OPM and locking people out of their accounts. That is basically the HR system for the federal civil service. And we saw Trump come out, this week when we want some comfort from our commander-in-chief after there's a tragedy, and with no evidence, blames a tragic incident on DEI and goes after Pete Buttigieg. This is the stuff that people said even when they held their nose, maybe the policy will be okay, but I really hate when he does this. This is the stuff that people hate. And I think there is a reminder there for Democrats that you need to fight back. You need to find your footing and not confirm any of these nominees. There should be no Democrat voting for any confirmation of any nominee while what's happening at OPM is happening, which is a takeover of the federal government, a gutting of the federal civil service.
I think that what you just said is really interesting, because I don't know if you, I think it was in Illinois Playbook, or somewhere, they reported this call that took place between the Democratic governors and Chuck Schumer, and the minutia of what was discussed was in that call, and the governors made that same argument, that why are Democrats voting for these cabinet positions? Even if we don't have the votes to derail a nomination, it can be shown to be a solid protest if every Democrat votes no. And according to the reporting, they had 5 different sources of people who were either on the call or told about the call directly. Schumer's response was, for some of them we can probably do that, but, not for all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, here's the thing I'll say about that is if you look at where there has been some really effective leadership in short order, in particular on the federal funding freeze and what it meant for states, and we watch this at Heartland Signal because we're focused on people in the Midwest, leadership in the Midwest. Both Governor Walz out of Minnesota and Governor Pritzker in Illinois were some of the first people to say, we got to flood the zone. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to hold a press conference. I'm going to tell you about the Head Start programs that are being frozen, kids being turned away. I'm going to tell you about the research grants that are being frozen that are preventing our universities and institutions from doing what they need to do. And I'm going to tell you that healthcare is now in peril for a bunch of Americans because we can't even access the portal to get those grants. And, you know, there was a little bit of backing down from the Trump administration, depending on how you read the OMB memo and its rescission. But that is what Democrats need to do right now. In addition, I think, to not cooperating with confirmation, is to flood the zone. And I don't mean to sit back and think about what's the best slogan and what's a billboard I can put up at my press conference that's a good graphic. Like, we just have to be out there. Donald Trump has been out there doing press conferences, gaggles, executive orders every single day. And there is a battle for attention that he has always been good at, good or bad attention. And we are constantly caught behind in that game. And some of it is a big problem. It's not like marching everyone out to do a press conference, 3 times in 36 hours or whatever is the answer. It is also about finding the right messengers and people who can speak in a way that people understand, that it's not some like consultant speak that can outline the stakes. And unfortunately, that's not everybody in Washington. Some people are good at different things.
Well,
I will say someone
that, I've been playing a lot of sound clips from Chris Murphy, who seems to have emerged as the conscience and the passion of the U.S. Senate. And I agree, not everybody can speak like a Bernie Sanders from the heart or a Chris Murphy. But dear God, that's 2. There's got to be more than 2, Tim.
I would throw Michael Bennett in there. I think Michael Bennett did an incredible job. And it's different. It is different types of communication, right? It is, okay, you're at the confirmation hearing. Are you doing an actual tough cross-examination of these nominees? I think Michael Bennett did a great job in 2 hearings, I think this week and last week. And we just need more of that. I think Senator Amy Klobuchar, I'm a little biased, I used to work for her, also did a really good job with Kash Patel yesterday, who was incredibly rude and dismissive. It's painful, but it is like a party growing moment, because we kind of have to think, like, who are the good messengers to be out there? Whether or not you agree entirely on every bit of policy together as a caucus, like, it's not about focusing on anything that's divisive right now. It's about stopping what we can all agree is bad from happening.
Yeah, without question. Did you hear the part of the governor and Chuck Schumer, Democratic governors and Chuck Schumer phone call where he told them that Cory Booker was in charge of the Senate's digital strategy, and that Cory Booker had put together a PowerPoint for the senators explaining what TikTok is and how often you should post, and Facebook and Instagram. And on the one hand, I suppose better late than never, but on the other hand, I found that utterly appalling. And it seems to speak to the whole senators are old and out of touch kind of argument that I hear fairly often on this show. I mean, what do you think about that? What's your reaction?
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm glad that presentation was made, but also, and there are, talented staff who know how to do that and should be doing it. But yes, the question I think is, in many circumstances, would you rather have someone, and again, but the point being that different people have different strengths. Every strength is not necessarily about communication, but I would say that is a very big part of what they do. Would you rather have an older elected official who needs to be walked through how to do a direct camera, how to talk to their phone? Or is there a value in having, again, whether you agree on every policy or not, someone who is a extremely good communicator like an AOC who knows how to pick up her phone and talk about the news of the day and do exactly what we're talking about, which is flood the zone or answer questions. I'm just really worried about that we as a party have not figured that out. And also, we don't have the outside infrastructure that the right wing does. I mean, Carolyn Leavitt today in her press conference has a quote-unquote new media seat, which I think is actually a very smart idea. But what they're going to do is bring in right-wing media every day. They let the Ruthless podcast, which are a bunch of, some former Republican operatives who have launched a very successful podcast. I saw them at the RNC. They had a big stage. They brought up a lot of guests. We're just not there. We're not playing that game as well as they are. And so it's a combination of, yes, inside with the elected officials, but also outside with progressive media. Yeah.
I was speaking a little bit earlier today when I was talking with the audience about this, about how I now love Chris Murphy passionately, because he does seem to bring it to the Republicans. And a couple of weeks ago, frankly, Chris Murphy brought it to the Democrats, too. He had a very impassioned plea where I don't know if he was on CNN, but he was like, where are the Democrats? Where's everybody? Well, I'm sorry. Why aren't we pushing back against all this? Jerry Connolly, of course, beat out AOC for head of the Oversight Committee. Have I missed it? Has Jerry Connolly been fighting the good fight? Has he been on the Sunday shows? Has he been on Morning Joe or CNN? Is he on social media pushing back against Donald Trump? Because honestly, I hope you're going to say he has been, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I don't know. And part of it is that, like, do you go on those shows? Are you out there? But part of it is also breaking through all of that, right? Like, we're in an era where you can go on a Sunday show and you can talk and you can make your points and you can pass the interview. But that's not quite what we're looking for right now, right? Like, we are looking for folks who can deliver a message that's powerful enough that you go on those Sunday shows and then it gets circulated on social media and it gets picked up elsewhere and it inspires articles and maybe causes people to react in other ways. So, and again, just to a younger group of members of Congress, elected officials, they know how to do this. They are much better at it. I mean, like, I think of like the Mallory McMorrows in Michigan. I think of like a Jasmine Crockett from Texas. I think of like a Max Frost from Florida. They are experts at this because, and it's to your point on like the presentation to senators, to a degree, it can't really be taught via PowerPoint. It is something that you grow up with and understand the technology and understand not only how to use it, but its power, and that it's a primary means of communication right now.
So what do we need to do to help the Democratic Party fight against this current administration? I get the feeling, Tim, that there's nobody in charge and there's no plan. Even a bad plan at this point, to me, would be better than no plan.
Yeah. Well, there is part of this that I think, and I'm not saying this is something we should accept, but the reason this is happening is that the party's a little bit in the wilderness right now. We are looking for who is our leader, who are we supposed to rally behind, who's calling the shots. We don't have that with any clarity right now. So that's why we are where we are. But, you should call your senators on these confirmation hearings and these confirmation votes and make sure they know your opinion and that these people should not be confirmed. I know sometimes it feels less useful to be calling your own party. I mean, you obviously have plenty of sway there, particularly if you're in their state, but you should be doing it. So I think that's one thing that's important. And the second is, I think finding and funding, although I'm not sure anyone who is listening is going to open a checkbook and fund progressive media, is hugely important. Find sources of information, support sources of information that create accountability, that are not part of, this new media seat in the White House briefing room that are just going to ask softball questions of the press secretary, and follow and subscribe. And that is maybe a not monetary way to do it, right? If you're not want to be a supporting member of progressive news outlet, but follow along, share, help grow those platforms like Heartland Signal. It's incredibly important for us to be able to do that.
By the way, Heartland Signal was quoted in the alt media newsletter, the very irreverent News of the Day newsletter put out by Adam Parkhomenko and Sam Youngman. I thought I was reading it, and I was like, wait a minute, that's Heartland Signal.
That's us.
So, yeah, good for us. I want to talk to you more about that. When we come back from a break, our executive editor, Tim Hogan, I've been asking a lot of people this, Tim. Okay, legacy media seems to be letting us down. So what are the other sources, obviously not Heartland Signal and CPT, because those are a given. What are the other places you turn for good information? Tim Hogan is going to be back with me right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Heartland Signal executive editor Tim Hogan, and one thing that I have been asking a lot of people these days is, what would you recommend? What are the sources of information that, other than Heartland Signal and WCPT, that you rely on? I was talking to our media experts, Jennifer Schulze, Mark Jacob, and they, of course, talk about ProPublica as something that they feel is very reliable. You know, here I talk to people from Atlantic Monthly, The Nation, Washington Monthly, which are also sources that I find to be interesting and reliable. Where do you look when you're looking for other sources of information?
Yeah. Well, I think part of this is also what does the broad question here is, you want to find reliable information. I think we also want to support a progressive media ecosystem. And just before getting to individual sources, I think what the right has done so successfully over such a long period of time is just hammer away at mainstream media, claiming that they have a liberal bias, that they are out to get them, that they're not reporting the facts correctly. And the right has done this with a lot of different institutions, but they've so drastically, with their audience, decreased the value of those institutions and that trust, that they have driven them to a new media ecosystem, a right-wing media ecosystem that's built a large audience and following there. I think the challenge for people who are center-left or who are liberal is we generally look at mainstream media and maybe we have issues or quibbles with the New York Times phrasing of a headline, or we don't like how they've covered some topic, but generally don't tear them down as non-trustworthy institutions. And so I think that impetus sometimes to find sources of information in a progressive media ecosystem, people feel a little less driven to do it. Like maybe you cancel your New York Times subscription when you get angry at them, but you're probably going to re-up it at some point. But the issue is that right-wing media ecosystem is like a cavalry. Right? It is a cavalry for them. They have built podcasts with large followings, Substacks with large followings, news outlets with large followings. They all amplify each other. And we just haven't done that enough on the left. So when I think about, like, what am I looking at that I think is interesting, growing, reliable, it is obviously, we love Heartland Signal. I think Courier Newsroom is an incredible fast growth outlet that we've seen do a lot of interesting state-based reporting over the last few years. There are individual personalities that I really like who I think are interesting. Someone like a Brian Tyler Cohen, who hosts No Lie on YouTube, is very smart. He's got great guests, and I think has very good perspectives on news of the day. Keith Edwards, who hosts the Keith Edwards Show, which is fairly new. I think just surpassed like 200,000 YouTube followers. The Midas Touch folks are very good. Pod Save America is very good. So when I answer that question, I think about it a little bit from the perspective of, like, what does that, center-left media ecosystem look like, and how can we be helpful in being a voice there, but also, helping build it?
I think your answer is really interesting, because I haven't had anybody talk about YouTube channels or podcasters, and I think that's the future. I was talking to somebody, a year or two ago about, I was really upset that the New York Times was, it seemed to me that they weren't playing straight and fair. It seemed to me that there was Biden is bad, Trump is okay kind of mentality. And they said, don't worry about the New York Times. nobody's going to. New York Times is people who read the Times. It's the informed talking to the informed. And that's not going to change anybody's votes. And I thought about that. And I think that, we just had this election, and it seemed like there was a whole blue-collar, working-class contingent that I don't think is reading the New York Times that based their vote on something. And maybe it was just what their friends say in conversation, but maybe it was something they saw that a friend posted on Facebook or some other avenue. And I think that we as Democrats have to figure out where those other places are, and we have to go there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. I think we have to go to those places. We also have to build those places. I think there is a lot of politically adjacent mixed media that seems right-leaning right now, and whether that is, like MMA or UFC or, comedian podcasts like Theo Vaughn that Donald Trump went on. What is that space for us? It is the question of who's the Joe Rogan of the left, I think, is a misnomer for a lot of different ways. But I think it's also important for us to kind of ask ourselves the question, how did we get in a position where Kamala Harris going on Joe Rogan could have been, not that it's going to change the election one way or another, but was a big question for us media-wise, right? That is not a friendly environment. That is a friendly environment for Donald Trump. And yet we had to make a big strategic calculation about whether or not we go on that program, whether or not it was worth it. And I think that, in itself tells us a little bit about where we are with media.
I read that there was a big debate because obviously she went on Call Her Daddy, which has a huge audience, but there was talk about whether or not she should go on Joe Rogan. And since you have a little more insight, what I read being reported was that it was decided overall that it would be seen as, I don't know, cavorting with the enemy or it just wouldn't give her anything. I'm not so sure I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, there's a very good article that is out 2 days ago in The Hill from Amy Parnes and Jonathan Allen, and it's probably it sounds like it's going to be part of their book. They're writing a book about the 2024 elections, very insightful, and they have a lot of reporting in here that I have not seen before that is fascinating. Includes commentary from Rob Flaherty, who is the deputy campaign manager focused on digital on the Harris campaign, and just sort of the back and forth of scheduling and how the rug was pulled out and the goalposts were kind of moved, use whatever metaphor you want, for trying to make it work. And part of the deal was, they wanted to have VP Harris in Austin to do it. That was a condition, Joe Rogan would not go anywhere else. But look, that takes you off the campaign trail. So what were they going to do? They were going to do this October 25th rally with Beyonce. They were going to go to Texas to highlight some of the strictest abortion laws in the country and then do the Joe Rogan interview. But as they were figuring that out, again, there was a scheduling issue. And if I read the article correctly, and listeners should go read it for themselves, the day that they were going to do it, actually, that is when Donald Trump booked his taping of it, which was floated to the campaign as, Joe has a personal day on that day. So, there maybe the early reporting was, okay, maybe there was some consternation in the campaign about whether or not she should have gone. But at the end of the day, honestly, it looks like a logistics question, and that it was made difficult for the Harris campaign to get it booked.
Interesting. Where did you say that article was?
It's in The Hill. It's from Amy Parnes. It's 2 days ago. It's called How Harris Failed to Land Rogan.
Interesting. We only have a couple of minutes left, so this is where I like to ask a question that takes 10 minutes to answer, just to make everybody's life difficult. Why do you think over time Democrats didn't start buying television stations like Sinclair didn't start creating, we've got OANN, we've got Newsmax, heck, News Nation now is right tilting, we got Fox, and on the other side we got MSNBC. Why was that not a priority for Democrats, media, radio, television, whatever, podcasting?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have the right answer to it, but I do think it has something to do with what I mentioned earlier, which is the right for a long time had cast mainstream media as lefty and liberal and not representing their views, and they created a space for a very long period of time to go find funders and say, this entire media landscape is against us. So go support, influencers or hosts like a Rush Limbaugh, who actually made it work commercially. That is part of the reason that he was successful, or like a Daily Wire finding funding and setting up a business model that works for them with seed funding over a long period of time. I think for us on the left, there maybe, there has been a little bit of laziness, honestly, of, we're listening to NPR for our radio. We are reading the New York Times for our digital coverage. We are subscribing to our local newspaper. And because we haven't had that same type of acrimony with mainstream media, the impetus for us to go invest hasn't been there. And instead, we've just done a lot of direct investment in campaigns, which is important. But I think you got to do both. I don't think you can be successful just one way. And I think we're finding out the hard way. Yeah,
really. Tim Hogan, executive editor of Heartland Signal, the digital arm of WCPT Radio. Thank you for being here, Tim. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Joan.
We're going to take a break for news. Hopefully, if the Madigan jury hasn't messed things up, we're going to talk to Ray Long about Mike Madigan's trial right after this.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am very pleased to be joined by my good friend Ray Long, who has been covering the incredible trial of the longtime Illinois Speaker of the House, Mike Madigan, a trial that has been in the hands of the jury. Ray, how long now?
3 days now, Joan. Good to be here with you. Thank you.
So mostly because of things that have been happening at the federal level, I have not been keeping the audience up to speed on the Mike Madigan trial. So could you give us the thumbnail sketch here?
Yeah, well, the 17-week thumbnail sketch is basically that Madigan's been accused of stuffing a lot of his pals onto the subcontracts that were kind of hidden through a third party. These were subcontracts for ComEd, which wanted big, lucrative legislation passed through the General Assembly. ComEd got the legislation. He's accused of a similar scheme for stuffing a former legislator onto the AT&T Illinois payroll through another third party subcontract. All of this was, according to prosecutors, to conceal this. And of course, the other highlight set of charges, or episode, if you will, is that Madigan was pushing to help move a piece of property that's a parking lot now in Chinatown from state ownership to city ownership, so that the government mole named Danny Solis could then use his zoning committee powers in the city council, and then he could move that property into city hands, and then developers could start building a high-rise, and Mike Madigan could end up with the property tax business that his law firm does and makes lots of money on. Those are the allegations. Of course, Madigan has denied all this, and he has pleaded not guilty. He also has his longtime confidant, Mike McLean, a former power lobbyist in Springfield. He's involved in 6 counts tied to Chinatown deal because legislation was involved in that, and McLean allegedly helped Madigan pull off the deal that the the prosecutors say should not have been done. It was illegal. So that's where we have it. McClain also has pleaded not guilty, and the jury's been out for 3 days pondering.
Well, you've attended the trial. Would you, if you were a juror, have been convinced?
Joan, you're not going to get me to say that because I'm still
I can try.
Covering it. But you can try. I appreciate that, too. The reality is that they've got two powerful teams of lawyers in the Madigan case and two powerful teams of lawyers in the McClain case. So the prosecutors, that's the same set for the prosecutors, and they have their A team on it. Madigan has spent $8 million from his campaign fund to put together one of the best defense teams you'll ever have. So I really compared it to kind of the thriller of Manila in big time courtroom battles. So this is one that the jury can find something to send out a verdict of guilty if they want to, and the jury could find something to send out verdicts of not guilty if they want to. There's enough flotsam and jetsam that's out there from both sides. That's why they're having to go through a lot of these different proposals that are on the table. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to sort through it all. They've asked for extra pens and extra copies of the indictment and everything but little pipe fitters and macaroni to do projects. Arts and crafts, I think, is what the judge was worried about or jokingly worried about. So, they're probably sitting back there they even asked for, I think, sticky notes to try to go through everything. There's, thousands of pages of evidence and there's 100 pages of jury instructions. It's kind of like if you'd never seen a football game before and you're suddenly inserted as a referee in the Super Bowl and supposed to determine what's right and wrong. So, it's a big job, and from everything I can tell, the jury's taking it very seriously.
Because some of it, from what little I gleaned in what I read, it sounds like some of this is kind of deep in the weeds. Like, Madigan said this, and Madigan's lawyer, well, of course he said that. I mean, in the normal course of his job, he would say that. It almost kind of seems like you have to almost be a political insider to judge, well, was that a fair statement or was that not a fair statement for somebody who had a job that really none of us will ever have and can probably really deeply understand? Is it too much to ask for 12 regular folks?
Well, that's an excellent question, and it's one that I've pondered, too, because the reality is that they spent like 4 days or 5 days picking the jury, an extraordinary amount of time, and they seemed to drill down to a lot of people who did not have much knowledge of state government at all. In fact, they were tossing people who had some experience in dealing with state government. And so I wonder if they'll all think the whole thing is distasteful, and is that good or bad? Yeah, certainly, it hasn't played out well for the folks in the ComEd 4 trial, and that those included Mike McClain. Mike McClain, who is a co-defendant of Madigan in this case, was in the ComEd 4 trial, and they were all found guilty. Tim Mapes, who was Mike Madigan's right-hand hatchet man, chief of staff, etc., he was found guilty, and Ed Burke was found guilty too. And the jurors have not held back. And the question I think that is most concerning to Madigan and McClain would be, do jurors now just think that politicians should be thrown in jail?
Yeah. Now, I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, deliberations wrapped up today. The jury is done for today. Is that correct?
Right.
So they're not sequestered, are they? Do they get to go home?
No, they do. They do. They get to go home. They'll spend the weekend there, and they have to try to stay away from any news stories as they have the last several weeks, 4 months of not watching.
Do they even know Trump is president?
Well, that would be a hard one to miss, I think. But yeah. I mean, if there's a Madigan story that comes on the air, they have to turn it off, hit mute, all that kind of stuff. So you've got all kinds of issues that they have to sort through and then try to fit it into the exact charges and fit it within that 100-page set of jury instructions we talked about, too.
Wait a minute. The jury instructions alone were 100 pages? Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
I've been you and I have been doing this my whole life. I'm not sure it would take me 4 days just to reread the jury instructions.
Well, yeah, not only that, there's over there's at least 150 tapes, too. And if they listen to most or all of them, that's going to take a while, too, Joan. When they go through this, the very first count is a racketeering conspiracy, and that's a count that's kind of an umbrella count, but it means that they could be finding problems with underlying issues with state bribery laws, or they could be finding underlying issues with official misconduct or legislative misconduct, as well as, under this same count, other types of federal laws ranging from extortion to, using the email or the phone under the kind of broader heading of interstate commerce in aid of racketeering. So, there's a lot of kind of complicated stuff that you really don't have to wonder about. Your promo there talks about you can be ready for conversation at the water cooler, but man, you may need to study pretty hard before you go
You start talking about this at the water cooler, everybody's going to go back to their desk and start working.
Yeah. What was that thing about?
Oh my God, you're so boring. I'm talking to Ray Long, who works for the Chicago Tribune and has been covering the trial of Mike Madigan, the longest-serving ever Speaker of the House here in Illinois. We are going to take a real quick break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I am joined by Ray Long, who is a reporter for the Chicago Tribune, who has been covering the trial of Mike Madigan, Illinois' longest-serving Speaker of the House. I know, Ray, when I have shown up for jury duty, you get questioned by the lawyers and the judge, who are you? What do you do for a living? Where do you turn if you want information? They try to get a feel. But once the jury is seated, you as a reporter, what information, if any, are you given about the jury?
That's interesting, too. We were able to sit through the questioning process.
Really?
But unlike most of the times, the names of the jurors were not given, so we only knew them by kind of their number this time. So we took, actually, my colleagues, Megan Crapeau and Jason Meisner, two terrific court reporters, were sitting through that process. And Megan and Jason took great notes about the guy who's a jury foreman, who happens to be from the 19th Ward, which is a big machine ward, of course. still pretty heavily Democratic, obviously, and still well-oiled in that it may have it just raises questions as to whether there will be some kind of understanding more so than of politics, more so than in other ward areas. Now, that person did not say that he was like a precinct worker or anything like that, but you know people who know people in tight-knit wards like that.
That's really interesting. My experience, well, you're like me, of a generation where I don't know what it was like for newspaper people, but, you know, for many years, if you were a television journalist and you got called for jury duty, you basically just called them and said, hey, you know, I'm a journalist, I work in television. They'd be like, oh, we don't want you. You know, you're off the hook.
Yeah.
And then they made this big move a few years ago. No, we want our juries need to be more diverse. We need to have a bigger pool. So everybody, if you're called, you have to go. But they still send me home every single time. And my sense of juries is that they want people like middle of the road, like not necessarily people who've been involved in a bad way with the law, or not people who are journalists or who read too many different publications. They want middle of the road people, like teachers, like nurses. That seems to me like the sweet spot that a lot of lawyers go for. But the trials I've been called to have mostly been criminal trials. For a political trial like this, a civil, is this different? I mean, it's white-collar crime. This isn't a murder trial.
Well, it is a criminal case, obviously, but it's federal court versus 26th in California, where you'd have state court. I was called for jury duty a few months ago, Joan, and you're right. I mean, everybody seems to show up for those. The very, very first person who was quizzed kept telling, saying, hey, would you feel okay about finding somebody guilty? The guy said no. And then, well, do you have any? Do you want to do anything here? Would you feel bad about a guilty verdict? And he says, well, I could not actually find somebody guilty. And then they said, what? Why? And he said, well, I've done a few things, And then they said, have you ever committed a crime? Yes. Have you ever been to prison? Yes. What were you there for? Murder. And then it was like I just got out like 2 or 3 years ago after 40 years in prison. So, that was the kind of thing. And then, like 2 or 3 people later, they started asking me questions, like what news sources do you use? And, well, of course, I said Joan Esposito, but, I added a whole bunch of other things, too. And, before they got through the first row of us, they called a timeout, and the case was called off and went off the rails. So it was there is a whole variety, and it is a science on how you pick folks. It's not like the TV show Bull or something like that, but there is an effort, I think, to try to get people, as you were saying, try to get people who have not studied this or covered this so that they have an open mind and can maybe listen to both sides and then try to find the truth.
One thing because I will tell you, I mean, when I was finally dismissed and not seated for the murder trial, after being there the entire day, I was a little cranky because I felt that I would be a superior member of the jury. And I may have made a few social media comments about, not being able to figure out why a fine, upstanding human being like me would be sent home. And somebody responded to me, I can't remember if it was a lawyer, who said that one thing that lawyers worry about is seating a strong personality, like journalists tend to be, that if that person makes up their mind a certain way, that they would be able to sway the other members of the jury to their way of thinking, that they don't want somebody they perceive to be basically somebody who could be a real sort of thought leader. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the 12 Angry Men theory,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Where you have one person who could be the Pied Piper on a case. It's interesting. I think there's all kinds of different pieces of the puzzle that go into this, and I think that one is probably as logical as any I've heard, because they clearly want people who can be persuaded one way or another, and that generally is not somebody who can look at things and come up with a conclusion through your own search of the truth, and maybe be used to searching for the truth like you and I do, So it's that's an interesting concept, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's a major factor.
Well, in all honesty, I absolutely would have done that. Once I looked at the evidence and made up my mind, I would have absolutely tried to convince other people of the rightness of my vision. So I guess if you don't want that on your jury, then I am not the person for you. Going back to the Madigan case, Mike Madigan, I believe, is 82 years old. I know that people who do bad things should have consequences, even if they're old. But when, it would be hard to be a human being on a jury and not taking 82 years into account, because you find the guy guilty, and even if it's a sentence of 5 years, it could be a death sentence,
Yeah, that's a tough one. The interesting twist on this is that Madigan is kind of a health nut. He's a fanatic about being healthy, and he doesn't look 82 years old. He didn't look like he was 50 or 55 or 75 when I covered him in Springfield. So, that's just kind of he's an outlier in that situation. He probably looks younger than I do now, and he's about 15 years older. So it's a real issue that I think the jury just has to set aside and decide. Their job is not to determine the length of sentence. Their job is to determine whether or not he did or did not do something wrong.
Well, he's facing 23 counts. Could they? Yeah. Is it possible that they can have a verdict on some of those counts and be a hung jury on some of the other counts? Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, that's possible. As you can remember from Rod Blagojevich's trial, he had two trials. The first one, he had one guilty verdict, and they were hung on the other counts. And then they retried, and he was convicted and eventually sent to prison for 14 years. And then, of course, Trump commuted that to about 8 years served. But, yes, the answer, the long-winded answer to your question is yes, they could divide. And then if they came back with they could try him again if there were some counts that they were unable to agree on and had a hung jury.
Hmm. If you had to guess, with 100 pages of jury instructions and, all those tapes and 1,000 different pages of testimony, would you guess that they will be out a long time?
One thing that I kind of wondered, and you can't get inside the jury room, so you can't watch. I wish you could have cameras just to watch that, because it would be one fascinating tale. But they sent a note to the judge this week that said on Fridays plural, they would be working from, like 10 to 3 or something like that. So this Friday was their first Friday, so I don't know if there was anything, bigger than just saying that, and it meant that, on Fridays we'll have this off, or it meant that we're going to be here for a while, and there'll be a lot of Fridays.
Oh, my goodness.
All you can do is look, try to read the tea leaves from the little pieces of tea that you get.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate the reporting that you have been doing, and that Jason has been doing, and that Megan has been doing. I know that that these kinds of court cases are sometimes really tricky and draining, and to stay on top of. And you guys have been doing just such great work. I've been paring back my subscriptions, but because of you, and you can go tell management this, because of you, Ray Long, I am continuing to pay for the Chicago Tribune. Single-handedly.
Well, thank you, Joan. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I just, I'm just trying to write it straight, and I appreciate that you appreciate that.
Thank you, Ray. It's always a pleasure, and I'll see you. I'll see you when we've got a verdict, and we'll take it apart then. Ray Long, Chicago Tribune reporter, one of the 3 reporters covering the jury deliberations for Mike Madigan. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We have a lot of different hosts who are here on the weekends. On Saturday at 5 o'clock, there's a show called If Caged Walls Could Talk. You know that animal welfare is a cause near and dear to my heart. I would like to welcome the host of our Saturday show, If Caged Walls Could Talk. Jody Werdeker is here. She's the founder, executive director of Chicago Alliance for Animals. And we're also joined by Steve Hindy, president of Showing Animals Respect and Kindness, which works out to be SHARK, which I think is so appropriate. Jody and Steve, welcome so very much.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you very much.
You know, I from time to time have, not only do we talk to anti-cruelty about animal rescue and adopting from a shelter, but I've also talked to the people who are behind the app Cage Free Illinois. Like if you want to buy eggs or if you want to buy meat that was the animals were humanely raised, you can download that app and you can find stores that sell the beef and the eggs that they verify were raised humanely. I know that one of the things I've been reading about lately is something, frankly, Jody, that I've never given much thought to, and that's rodeos. There's a rodeo event that I think you've been talking about called steer tailing. Tell me what's going on here.
Yes, definitely. So steer tailing is an event that takes place at rodeos around different counties in Illinois, specifically in Boone County and Ogle County, Illinois. And Showing Animals Respect and Kindness have worked to expose the cruelty of rodeos for decades. And for the last 3 years, they have investigated these steer tailing events where they have video documented extreme cruelty to steers and horses. And Steve Hindy is one of the 3 people who go out in the field and witness and document this immense animal suffering, which is illegal in Illinois. So I'd like to let Steve tell you a little bit more about it.
Steve Hindy, take it away.
Joan, steer tailing, we've, as Jody mentioned, we've investigated rodeos for some 3 decades, all across the country and into Europe and Canada. 99% of these have been American-style rodeos. This particular rodeo is what's typically called at Mexican rodeos. And so they're unsanctioned. They have no licenses, and they're occurring on private property. And they're like no other rodeos that we've seen. Rodeos are very hard on animals, generally speaking. American-style rodeo, a lot of people may not think about it, is very hard on the animals. A lot of animals are injured and killed. Unfortunately, the rodeos right here in Illinois, which claims to have one of the best humane laws in the country, it's the worst rodeo cruelty we have ever witnessed. Animals are having their legs broken, their horns broken, their backs broken. They suffer what's called degloving, where the upper portion of their tails are literally ripped off the tailbone. And in many cases, and especially until we started exposing it, there was no veterinary care being given to these animals. The steers were being run as many as 20 times or more in a single day. In an American-style rodeo, they're run once. And horses are just openly and flagrantly beaten. They're punched in the face. They're whipped just mercilessly. Steers, because of the overworking of the steers, they're being electroshocked just all day. It's just a constant shocking.
And this is taking place in Illinois?
Yes. Yes.
And because what? Well, because these are held on private property, it's not, is it not subject to the rules and regulations that a regular rodeo would be?
No, state law still applies. I mean, state law, humane laws apply anywhere in the state, but they're not being enforced. You can have the greatest law in the nation, and we, as far as the written law, we have one of the best laws in Illinois. The problem is that they're being completely ignored in these events. And the worst of it is happening in Boone County, Illinois, where there are a number of other states or other counties. Will County, DeKalb County, McHenry County. They have some of these events. They have maybe 1 or 2 arenas. Boone County is completely ignoring the cruelty that's going on, and they've got a half dozen arenas, even though Boone County is one of the smallest counties in the state, because they've simply turned a blind eye to the whole thing.
Whose job is it to enforce these laws?
Well, ultimately, the state's attorney is supposed to be conducting prosecutions, but the sheriff's office, is supposed to enforce the law. Boone County has an animal services office, which is certainly supposed to be taking care of the animals, and they don't. It's just not happening. And I'm telling you, if you've ever looked at the footage of some of this, what's going on, it is. If we were hearing about this in some third world country, people would be outraged. But it is happening right here. In fact, a YouTube comment, somebody pointed out to me a YouTube comment to one of our latest videos where a person was accusing us of lying about where it was happening. They said it couldn't happen here in Illinois. It is happening here in Illinois, and it's awful. It's just terrible.
And, Joan, the Illinois Humane Care for Animals Act clearly states no person or owner may beat, cruelly treat, torment, or otherwise abuse any animal, and nor overwork. That's in there as well. And what we're witnessing are horses being punched in the face, whipped horrifically from these so-called cowboys on their backs. We see animals being shocked with electric bolts, and they're in oftentimes these chutes where they cannot escape. They cannot hide. They cannot get away from the pain. And the imagery and the suffering is so horrific. And then many steers become lame. They break legs. Their legs become broken. And then they're denied veterinary care, which is also another violation of the Illinois Humane Care for Animals Act. And no officials in Boone County, Ogle County we don't even believe they're looking at the footage, but they will not investigate. They will not pass the information on, or if they have passed it on to the state's attorneys, they won't do anything about it.
Well, you said that the Attorney General was responsible for prosecuting these cases. Is Kwame Raoul not able to act because nobody's bringing him cases to prosecute?
Well, we have written to Kwame Raoul many times. In fact, we've actually held protests outside Kwame Raoul's office, trying to get him to do something about this. I have sent him video links, so he can see the evidence for himself. We've been asking for meetings. They will not meet with us. They will not give us any kind of response, certainly not a written response. They just won't even talk to us about it on the phone. People are going down there and protesting, and for some reason, I don't pretend to know
what do they say?
Exactly what's going on here.
When you write a letter or communicate that your organizations would like a meeting to talk about this issue, what do they say? Oh, sorry, we're too busy? We're going to be out of town that week, or what?
They don't respond. They don't respond at all. I have called the office, the Chicago downtown office. I've spoken to multiple representatives who answer the phone, and I've been very clear in stating that we want a meeting, we want to discuss this, because nobody else is doing their job in these two counties, and the two main counties, Ogle and Boone County. So that now it's up to Kwame Raoul to get involved, because the other people in these positions of power are refusing to do their job. And we just continue to get a runaround constantly. And we were just downtown yesterday protesting outside his office. We have video cameras that show the footage. People are horrified by it. And his office has told concerned citizens who've let us know that his office continues to tell them to call the local law enforcement or the Illinois Department of Agriculture, who also will not do anything.
Well, maybe you might be getting some traction from him in the near future. He's one of the people who's been rumored to be interested in Dick Durbin's job if Dick Durbin decides not to run for re-election. I would imagine that in a situation like that, possibly you might find the office a little more responsive going forward. But is this the kind of situation? Obviously, if it's up to law enforcement to determine if laws are being broken. But is there any kind of civil action that can be taken, any kind of court suit that can be brought to at least publicize this, if not take them to task?
We do have a lawsuit against Boone County right now. It was filed back in 2023, I believe, trying to get a judge to tell them to enforce the law. But they're stonewalling this thing. That lawsuit will probably outlive most of us, the way it's going right now. And it is so frustrating. I can't tell you that the law is clearly being broken. There are people on the Boone County board that are trying to make things better. They've tried to put a stop to a number of these things, and they're literally being stonewalled by the state's attorney's office, which is the very office that should be spearheading stopping this whole thing. So we really we're frustrated beyond words. Ogle County is another problem spot where they just told the animal services guy head literally sent me an email saying, I've been ordered not to do anything about this.
Wow.
And there's simply no reason. In Will County and DeKalb County, they have filed charges. And in McHenry County, for instance, they passed an ordinance saying Okay, you have to have a veterinarian there on site. You have to have an emergency medical services person for people there, because we saw a guy very badly injured in DeKalb County last summer, and there was nobody to help him. They literally had to bring in a helicopter because they had nobody ready to help humans who got injured. It's just a crazy situation. It shouldn't be happening anywhere in the United States, and by gosh, it certainly shouldn't be happening in Illinois.
Wow, that's amazing. I know that there are a lot of people listening to this conversation now that would like to help out in some way. What can listeners do?
Well, the first thing I would encourage them to do is go to steertailing.com, where you will see some of the evidence. The only thing is, I must warn you that once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it's bad stuff. But then, go ahead, Jody, let's give some contact information. But I would first go to steertailing.com, and you can see what we have filmed for yourself.
Yes, and I would definitely urge anybody in Illinois to contact Kwame Raoul at 312-814-3000 and urge him to stop this illegal animal cruelty. And if you are listening and you make that call, don't let them tell you to call the Illinois Department of Agriculture or local law enforcement. Tell them they will not do anything. The Illinois Department of Agriculture actually sent us an email and made a public statement saying, please report any potential violations of the Illinois Humane Care Act to law enforcement or the prosecutor in the county in which it was observed. Violations of the Humane Care Act are criminal offenses, and the Department of Agriculture cannot pursue criminal charges. So if Kwame Raoul tells you to call the Department of Agriculture, tell them that they won't do anything, and now it's up to him. But I do want to tell everybody that we have a bit of good news. Legislation's been introduced in Illinois that will literally ban the dragging or pulling of any bovine by its tail. It's kind of silly that in 2025 we need a law that literally states that people cannot intentionally drag or pull any bovine by its tail by any means for the purpose of entertainment, sport, practice, or contest. The bill is SB 45. So another thing that concerned citizens can do is contact their Illinois state senator and urge them to support this humane measure and co-sponsor SB 45.
Who are the sponsors of SB 45 right now?
It's just, for now, the last I checked, it's just we just have the one sponsor. It was just recently introduced, and I don't believe it's been sent to the next committee, where it will likely be for a while. So we don't have that information. I'm not even sure what committee it will be going to, but that's something that our partner, the Humane Farming Association, has really helped with this bill. And if we can get this bill passed this year, then we'll stop these cruel activities happening in Illinois.
In the Illinois legislature, who are the state reps or the state senators that you find, and obviously you can't name them all, who you find to be sympathetic to your cause and willing to consider these animal protection measures? I'm wondering, if I was thinking maybe I should get one or more of them to join me on the radio and talk about why they think it's important.
Well, Senator Ventura. Go ahead, Jody.
No, go ahead. I was going to say the same things to you.
Senator Ventura in Will County is the person she's the person bringing the bill forward. And, Joan, can I explain for a second what steer tailing is? I think we didn't even explain what it is. What happens is a steer is sent out of a chute, and the steer is at a full run, and the contestant comes up on horseback alongside the steer, grabs the steer by the tail, and pulls the tail of the steer so that the steer is literally pulled around to the side and backwards. And, of course, steers don't run backwards or sideways any better than we do. And so these 600-pound animals come crashing to the ground, completely uncontrolled crash to the ground. and that's how they break their horns, their necks, their backs, their legs. And have their tails literally ripped off, because these sharp spurs come across their tail, which starts a cut, and then the heavy pulling on a 600-pound animal can literally pull that surface of the tail right off.
You know, we think we're so evolved as human beings, but the things that still exist, the cruelty that still exists for the amusement of some, can be just staggering. Just staggering. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to ask you guys about the tortoise. What was that? What's the tortoise?
Spur.
The Free Spur campaign.
Yes, definitely. The Chicago Alliance for Animals have been working on this campaign for more than 3 years now. For anyone who may not know, Spur is an African sulcata tortoise who was taken from the wild, stolen from her family and her home, and has languished in a display case in a pet store in Lincolnwood called the Animal Store for more than 30 years now. She has absolutely nothing natural to her life. She lives on a tiled floor with a little hay. And she really has nothing to her life. She has no enrichment. Steve and I testified before Lincolnwood's Board of Trustees last couple weeks ago now, and we've been doing this at every board meeting for 3 years. And after we testified, we went over to the store to see Spur through the window, and it was 0 degrees outside. And she is from Africa. Her natural habitat would be 80 to 90 degrees, and she's up against this big glass window. We've never once saw her have drinking water in her what I call a prison. In the 3 years we have fought this campaign, and as of just a few days ago, they're starting to give her water, because we've been filing reports with the Lincolnwood police. In addition to Spur, there are so many other exotic animals that this menagerie sells, and so Lincolnwood has an ordinance on their books that prohibits the keeping of wild animals. Cook County has an ordinance prohibiting the sale of rabbits. And back in March of 2022, the village board voted to waive both of these laws. They've opted out of the rabbit law for nearly 9 years or so now, and it puts immense pressure on Red Door Animal Shelter and all of the local animal rescues and volunteers who go out every day to rescue rabbits that have been dumped or abandoned around Chicagoland. And it's just everything. This is all on Lincolnwood's board and Mayor Giselle Patel for their irresponsible and inhumane decisions.
I am so glad that you guys are paying attention to this stuff that a lot of us either don't know is happening or don't understand the background here. Thank you both. Jody Wiedeker is the host of our Saturday show, If Caged Walls Could Talk. It is every Saturday here on WCPT at 5 p.m. And Steve Hindy is president of Showing Animals Respect and Kindness. Thank the two of you so much for the work you do. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for caring about animals.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joan.
It's, I've got this pulpit, and sometimes complaining about politics just needs to take a back seat to other things. So, Jody and Steve, thank you so much for being here and sharing these stories.
Thank you again for the time.
We are going to take a break, and I'm going to wrap things up when we come back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
That is going to do it for me, for today, and for this week. Your assignment, as it is every weekend, is find a respite, find something that brings you joy. Maybe it's a good time to put together that sheet of paper or that Word document that has your state senator, your state rep, your congressperson, and your senators, and where their offices are, and their email addresses and their phone numbers. Have it handy, because believe me, you are going to need it. We have to stay on top of this. We have to figure out, even if we have voted for people who seem to represent our interests, who are from the party we believe in, you got to keep an eye on what's coming up and what they are doing, okay? So there's your homework. Patty Vasquez's show is next, and Dwayne Kennedy and Adam Burke, two Chicago comedians, are going to be sitting in for her tonight. Remember, tomorrow we've got The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. He's got a great lineup of guests. I think the one I'm most looking forward to is Sarah Posner. She wrote Unholy, How White Christian Nationalists Powered the Trump Presidency, and the devastating legacy they left behind. Always an interesting time from 1 to 4 on Saturday afternoon. And remember, if you want to say hello to Richard and me, we will be out in Skokie, North Shore. Today's Friday. Yeah, tomorrow night. The Capitol Fools are performing at 7:30. They're also performing at 2 if you want to go then. And Richard and I will be sitting at the WCPT table. I'm a little... I was originally told the table would be there at 7. It might be there as early as 6:30, though, okay? So whenever you get to Skokie North Shore, please come by. I hear we have SAG-AFTRA WCPT T-shirts to give away, so there's swag. I hope to see you then. And, of course, I will also be on the radio with you this coming Monday at 2 o'clock. Have a great weekend, my friends. Good night.